You may have heard of the Trails series of JRPGs, and if you have, you likely recognize them as one of the longest running and most consistent RPG franchises around. That's certainly high praise, so I definitely wanted to give them a try myself. In case you're unaware, the Trails series of games are actually serialized rather than anthological like most JRPGs such as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. What I mean is that every game in the series, of which there are currently 13 entries, contributes to a huge world and an overarching story. To keep things somewhat digestible, the games are split into arcs, and the Trails in the Sky first chapter, second chapter, and the third make up the first 3 games in the series and the first story arc. Naturally, I started here, specifically with the PSP release of Trails in the Sky first chapter. There is a remake out now, with second chapter remake coming later this year, but personally, I like to play original releases first if I can. So with that, I want to find out, what's the deal with Trails in the Sky? So believe it or not, I actually first started playing Trails in the Sky first chapter I don't even know, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. I don't even know how long it's been. It's been a long time. And it took me about 3 years to play it and to finish it. And I don't really know why that is. I mean, I was playing it on the PlayStation Vita, with the PSP release. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's just because I was drawn to bigger games with bigger graphics and bigger stories. I mean, Trails in the Sky is a pretty quaint game, with it being the first entry, not only in the story arc, but also in the entire Trails franchise. Things are pretty small scale, and it's quite a short, or what would you say, slow burn is what people would say. It takes a while for things to ramp up, and I appreciate that. I like that things, stay kind of quaint and things naturally build up as the games go along and everything. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it just didn't quite keep my attention, but I did finish it, and I really enjoyed it. I look back on it fondly. And I started the second chapter immediately after finishing it, and I'd probably say, a better time with it than the first one, but overall I really see them as quite consistent in quality, and I, do recommend them. That's why I'm here talking about them. So, yeah, I've been playing the second chapter for about, 6 months or something now, so it's still a pretty slow progression for me, but I do think it's holding my attention a little bit more than the first one, and I just continue to feel motivated to continue to sit down and make progress with it. I mean, really the big thing that motivates me to play these games is the fact that it's such a long-running series. I mean, there's 13 games in the entire franchise, and I've heard nothing but praise about all of them. They're all good. And I love JRPGs, and I love the idea that the games come out so often. They come out almost every year, so it's just if you can keep up with it, it's just a pretty reliable source of good JRPG gaming, which I love. I mean, think about it. For fans of Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Persona, we have to wait years for new mainline releases. And people who are fans of Trails games, they get new games every year. It's unfair. So I want to be able to enjoy that as well. So that is really the main reason, the main thing that keeps me motivated to put time into the Trails series more than other games, really. It's I don't know. It makes sense, right? It almost feels like a long-running fantasy novel series or something, more than just video games, because so much of it is about the sort of overarching story that connects all the games. And the fact that, they're consistently turn-based with that gameplay. It's just, you don't get that too often these days. So it definitely is an exciting prospect to get into this series. So when people talk about the Trails games, they mostly focus on the story, which makes sense. I mean, really the story portions of the game, at least from my experience with Trails in the Sky 1 and what I've played of Trails in the Sky 2 so far. Story does make up a pretty generous portion of your time playing the game, but it's not the entire game. I mean, Trails in the Sky 1 probably is a 40 or 50 hour game. Second chapter is around the same, I want to say. But I mean, there's still plenty of time where you're not progressing the story and you're just playing the game. And I feel like a lot of people brush over that aspect of things. So I want to kind of set aside the story, because, you know, if you're watching a video on Trails in the Sky, you're probably hearing people mostly talk about the story. I'm going to not do that too much. I want to focus on what it's like to actually play these games. That's kind of my specialty. So, yeah, is the gameplay any good? I mentioned that the first game starts pretty slow. Second game's also been pretty slow so far. I'm in about like chapter 5, which I believe is like the halfway point of the game. But so far, I mean, the pacing between the two is pretty similar. So with the first game, you're pretty restricted on who is in your party at any given time, which can definitely limit, you know, some of the fun and the customization of the gameplay. The second entry, on the other hand, gives you a little bit more freedom. So usually, you know, your party consists of 4 characters more often than not, you know, so you'll usually have 2 of your party slots filled by kind of required participants, and then it's up to you to decide who the other 2 party members are, more often than not. And personally, you know, I really gravitated towards 2 specific characters, and I can get into that here in a little bit, but let's just talk about generally how the game is structured. So, you know, when you think of like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or whatever, you know, it's funny to bring up Final Fantasy because really the structure of those games changes constantly. I mean, if you look at Final Fantasy 1 through 9, you know, specifically, that's a pretty consistent span of games. You know, those are overworld-based JRPGs, similar to Dragon Quest, with towns and dungeons and all of that. So Trails in the Sky is not a overworld game. There is no separate overworld. Instead, it's in some ways it's actually a little bit more immersive than an overworld structure. So it really is like you have your primary towns, and then you have roads that connect all of the towns, and then you have dungeons. So everything is interconnected by roads, and then there are like kind of, what would we say, off branches or side roads that lead to dungeons and stuff like that. And, you know, with that structure, you would think that there would be kind of some freeform exploration and stuff like that. However, from my experience, the game keeps things pretty linear, which is a little bit of a shame, but, you know, it works well enough. I'm sure as I continue to play the second chapter game, you know, perhaps later in the game, it'll allow me to kind of traverse the entire world. But as it is right now, the game is structured with chapters, and in each chapter, you show up at a new town, you kind of get hit with a heavy batch of story, and then they kind of set you loose in the town and in the surrounding areas to complete side quests, to explore, to do all of that stuff. So there's a hefty, you know, portion of each chapter where you're kind of just able to play the game without any story interruption, which is nice. And of course, you could just ignore all the side quests and just keep progressing the story. But I think most people will tell you that it's worth it to take things slow and to do the side quests and all of that stuff, because all of it really just immerses you in the world. A lot of it gives you extra context for the world. And also, I mean, you're playing a video game, so it makes sense to want to play more of that game, right? At least if you're like me, and actually the gameplay in a video game is one of the primary reasons why you're doing the thing. I know some people just play games for stories, but I am not like that. I like gameplay. So being able to take my time in these sections and, you know, really get into the combat and all that stuff is really the highlight for me. So yeah, not only do you have the freedom to complete these side quests, you can also just kind of explore the towns, talk to the NPCs. The games are famous for their NPC dialogue. You know, it's all very rich and very detailed. The NPCs will change what they say depending on if you progress the story. NPCs will remember you, like from the first game into the second game, if you completed their side quests and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential there for immersion if you take the time. So, I mean, I'll admit I don't meticulously try to talk to every single NPC while I play, because that just sounds tedious. But I will kind of just organically talk to NPCs as I see fit. But also the fact that there is just so much detail and there is so much potential to miss, you know, special interactions with NPCs and stuff like that, it actually gives me a feeling of like replay value. You know, the fact that there's a high likelihood that I'm missing certain things, just makes me feel encouraged to eventually go back and play the games again. And I like that kind of thing. I mean, I feel the same way about like the Persona games. You know, your ability to miss certain social links and stuff like that. Like, to me, I'm okay with not doing everything in one playthrough because, hey, if I really like a game, that just means that I can get to see new stuff next time I want to play it, which is cool. And also, these games do have New Game Pluses. I haven't tried the New Game Plus mode, but I've heard that, you know, it could be pretty worthwhile. And, you know, certainly with how much missable stuff there is, it could be, you know, worth it to perhaps even pull up a guide and make sure you catch everything the second time around. But I try not to use a guide when I play, you know, for the first time. I want to try to keep things organic. So yeah, you can complete your side quests, you can talk to your NPCs, but also you can upgrade your equipment. So equipment is really like not only your gear and your accessories, but also your orbment. Let me say that again, your orbment. Orbment is really like the source of your spells. It's kind of similar to like the materia system in Final Fantasy VII, but I'd say it's better than that. There's more depth, in my opinion. So before I get into all the details about progression and stuff like that, let me just generally talk about what the battle system is like. So these games are turn-based, you know, with an actual turn order that is based on your speed stat, which adds some kind of dynamic stuff going on with the battles. It is also grid-based, so not only do you have the sort of dynamic turn order, but you also have the ability to move your characters around to, you know, potentially dodge attacks or just create some distance with enemies and stuff like that. So I mean, that adds a whole other strategic layer, which I love. And yeah, so I mean, you have your ability to do your basic physical attacks that you would expect. You also have your spells, which are called arts in this game, which I'll get into a little later. You also have crafts, which is funny, arts and crafts, I don't know. The crafts are like your physical abilities, separate from, you know, your spells. And basically you have like MP, which is consumed by using your arts, and then you have like CP, craft points, that are consumed by doing your abilities. MP is one of those, you know, functions similarly to other JRPGs where you just have like a full meter of NP with each rest at an inn or whatever, each level up, and it slowly, you know, gets drained as you use spells. CP, on the other hand, is generated by like landing attacks on enemies, by taking damage, all of that stuff. So it functions a little bit differently, and I'd say it's a little bit more of like a valuable resource than NP. And if you fill up the meter to either 100 or 200, you can even pull off kind of like a special limit break type move. So it's kind of like a give or take kind of situation. You can either kind of like slowly drain your CP with these kind of regular abilities that can be very powerful, or you can save it up and blow it all in one big move. However, if you end up getting knocked down in a battle, you lose all of that CP. So in some ways, it punishes you for being too greedy and holding onto it and not using it. So one of my favorite things about the battles is actually your ability to sort of manipulate the battlefield. So obviously, you know, you're going to have your spells that can increase your speed. You have certain orbments that you can equip that will make it so that when you're casting spells, you know, they go off faster. Because that's an interesting thing. It's like when you cast a spell, it takes a while for that spell to go off, which I like. So it's like you have to use one turn to just initiate the process of casting the spell. So that kind of gives you the enemy the opportunity to interrupt you potentially, or kill you, you know. So there's the benefit to doing physical attacks because you can do stuff that same turn and kind of shift the tides potentially, versus, you know, the spell is going to take longer. But there are ways to increase the speed of which you're able to do spells. Let's say an enemy kind of uses their turn to initiate a spell, because they follow the same rules as you, which is cool. You have the ability to impede their casting. So let me explain what that means. So basically, you see that they're about to cast a spell, and you're like, well, I don't want that to happen. So you can use one of your crafts, one of your physical abilities, to strike them and impede their casting. So that means it basically cancels their ability to cast that. So the game gives you like the tools to manipulate your enemies, keep them from firing off their strongest attacks. And I just love that. I love that control of the battlefield that it gives you. And of course, as you get more powerful, you get access to status increases and status debuffs and ailments and all this stuff that you can toss at your enemies. And I think the game does a pretty good job of making it so that strong enemy encounters at least have one or a couple status ailments that they're weak to. That's always a buzzkill in JRPGs or RPGs in general, where like, oh, I'm finally fighting a strong enemy, but it's resistant to every single status ailment, so why would I ever use these? This game does a better job of that. So I like that. So in terms of like the general difficulty, I really like more difficult games. I have been playing the Trails game so far on the normal difficulty, just because I heard that like the hard mode is kind of unbalanced. Like they didn't really put that much time into playtesting those versions of the game. So I've found that normal has given me a pretty good balanced experience. It's never felt too easy. But I guess I would be fine with it being more challenging, personally. So if I ever were to replay it, I'd probably bump it up. And if I were to do a New Game Plus playthrough, I'd bump it up to the highest level, which is Nightmare. In future releases, if I hear that the difficulty is more balanced or that they put more effort into providing a polished experience in the higher difficulties, I definitely plan on trying those out instead of just rolling with normal, because it's just when a game gives you so many systems to get more powerful and everything, to me it makes sense to make the game harder so that I feel more motivated to invest in those things. Because the Trails games definitely have a lot of subsystems that you can either interact with or just completely ignore, and I'd rather have the motivation to want to invest in those things. So with that, let's talk about progression. So the game does have a traditional level up system like you'd see in most JRPGs. However, it kind of does that thing where it caps the amount of levels that you can gain at any given time. Think like Lost Odyssey, or there are other games that do this, but I can't think of them. Lost Odyssey is the first one that comes to mind that has like really egregious sort of like, I don't even know what to call it. Like it limits how high your level can be. Like okay, when you first get into a new area and you're killing enemies, they're going to give you a lot of XP until you hit a certain level, and then they're going to give you like nothing. So it's really not worth it to grind specifically for XP. So really, leveling isn't something you really have to pay attention to, because it's kind of just going to naturally happen as you play. However, there are other things for you to grind for, which I appreciate, because I actually like the process of grinding. So I've mentioned Orbment a couple times. That's the system that is behind your ability to cast those arts, those spells, and it's great. And again, I compared it to Materia. It is somewhat similar to that, a little bit more complicated. It has more depth. I really like it. So it's kind of difficult to explain, and there is a little bit of a learning curve. But basically, you collect these orbments that you can slot into your characters. Usually they give you like a stat boost or something along those lines. But also the kind of way that you slot your orbment into your characters also gives you access to certain spells. And it can be a little bit of like a puzzle. So each like orbment has sort of a certain elemental affinity. So your red ones are fire, your blue ones are water, your brown ones are earth, gray ones are space, yellow ones are or actually the gray ones are time, the yellow ones are space, etc. So basically as you like slot in certain colors of orbment, it's going to give you more access to certain spells of that elemental connection. So if you are slotting in a lot of those time, those gray orbments, you're going to get access to more of those time spells. That is the same for the fire and the water and all of that. But then as you mix the elements, that can unlock entirely different powerful spells and stuff like that. So the idea is you can kind of experiment with mixing up the kind of orbments that you can slot into your characters to get all kinds of different spells. And usually it encourages you to, use multiple elements to unlock the best stuff. The game actually does include like an in-game guide of all of the spells and how to, unlock them or how to get access to them in your characters. So you should never have to like look it up on the internet, which I appreciate. But it can still be a little bit of a puzzle because of the way that the game sort of makes you slot it in. So I mean, like certain characters make it more difficult for you to take full advantage of getting like the orbments and all that stuff, and it's kind of complicated. I won't get into all the minutia of it, but basically there are certain characters that are more clearly built for art usage, where there aren't so many limits on how many orbments you can put on them and how they mix together and all of that. So I mean, especially in the second game where you have more freedom to form your party, I've definitely like gone with those art users because I've just found that I can break them more easily. I can give them super busted spells and stuff like that, and that's a lot of fun. So I've really found that there's kind of a cap on how powerful your like physical users can be, and I haven't felt as limited by like the spellcasters. So there is a little bit of like an imbalance there, at least as far as I can tell, where it seems like the spellcaster party members are more clearly beneficial than just like the physical attackers. So there is like a separate currency for the orbments. So as you slay enemies, not only do you get XP, but you also get Sepith, which is basically just like, let's think of them as like crystals that you spend to unlock the orbments. And there is a different color of Sepith for each color of orbment. So if you're trying to buy more fire orbments, you're going to need to collect more red Sepith and the such. And certain enemies, carry different colors of Sepith. So this, there's kind of like a farming element to battling enemies and stuff like that. If you're trying to get more of a certain kind of orbment, you're going to want to fight a certain kind of enemy to collect that Sepith. So that is kind of where the grind comes in if you want to grind, and I mean, I like grinding. So that's a nice little addition there. Something that's also interesting is you don't get gold or like regular currency from enemies. The only way that you get gold is like by completing quests. You get kind of like a cash payout, and then you can sell your Sepith. And, so that kind of creates an interesting thing there where it's like, well, obviously you want to spend your Sepith on the orbments, but you also need gold sometimes to like buy armor and new weapons and accessories and items and stuff like that. So, it's really easy to just run out of money. And then it's like, well, I guess I should probably sell some of this Sepith. And then you kind of have to choose like, okay, which color of Sepith do I want to like get rid of? Which color am I fine sacrificing so I can get some money? And that's an interesting kind of situation the game puts you in, and I actually like it. I like the feeling of a sort of tight economy. So I mean, I'm a fan. There are also cooking and fishing subsystems in the game, and I like those as well. I will admit that especially in like the first game, mostly ignored these systems. I've tried to pay more attention to them in the second one so far, and I found it pretty rewarding. I mean, as you battle enemies, not only do you get XP from them, you get the Sepith from them, but often they'll also drop materials, and you can use these materials to cook more often than not, which are usually way more powerful than just like the items, the regular potions that you can buy from shops. So it's definitely beneficial to invest in that. Fishing, I haven't spent as much time with. I mean, it's just another way to get more materials for cooking. Sometimes you can also, like, the fish will spit out Sepith and accessories and stuff like that, which is kind of funny. So, I mean, I'm definitely interested in doing more of the fishing as I continue to play second chapter and in future entries. I mean, it seems pretty promising. It's just like a fun little side thing that you can do. I mentioned, buying gear and accessories from shops. I mean, more often than not, it's kind of like a situation where it's just you want to buy the thing that has the higher numbers. Especially in second chapter, I've noticed that there's more like unique gear that you'll find in like dungeons and chests and stuff like that, which are actually interesting. You know, not only do they increase your defense, but they might increase your speed or your defense against spells or your strength of your spells and stuff like that. So it usually, you know, there might be a little bit more of like a decision to make there about like which substats you want to increase beyond just defense. But really, the core of the progression is the orb mints, at least, you know, that I've found so far. And I actually really enjoy spending time in those menus and experimenting. So when it comes to questing, you know, I mentioned, you know, you spend time in the towns, you have the roads, which have monsters that you can run into, you have the dungeons, which have monsters you can run into. The primary difference between the roads and the dungeons is that the roads, you get a full map that you can look at that tells you where you can go, whereas the dungeons don't have a mini-map, so there's more of a component of exploring and getting lost and all of that stuff, which I like, personally. And of course, you know, at the end of dungeons, you get usually a boss or something. And usually there's some really good chests with really good gear that you can find. And sometimes the chests will even have like super powerful enemy encounters. So you kind of get like a mini boss experiences as you find the chests and stuff like that, which I really enjoy. The side quests are usually split into sort of like investigative quests and more just regular battle quests. So with the investigation ones, you know, usually that's progressed by just finding the right NPCs to talk to or the right pieces of the environment to interact with. And these can be kind of more boring. I don't love that kind of thing. This is more where I'd be tempted to go on the internet and sort of just like be told what I need to do, because I just don't find the investigation type of gameplay as fun as battling. So I definitely prefer the battle type of side quest where it's just like, hey, there's a super strong monster on this road, go fight it and we'll give you money and stuff like that. So I mean, those kind of side quests are definitely my preference, and there's usually plenty of them in each town, so that satisfies me. So that, I'd say, more like kind of makes up the bulk of the gameplay. You know, what playing the game is actually like. I guess I could talk about the dungeons a little bit more. I mean, really, I'd say you spend more time on like the roads than you do in the dungeons. I like dungeons in JRPGs, and I do think the dungeons are pretty good. Like, they're pretty enjoyable in the game so far. I like that you can get lost. I like that there is really good gear to find if you take the time to kind of explore the dungeons. I mean, these are all the things that I want to see when I'm playing a JRPG. So it hits all of those notes. It's just that maybe, you know, the time between dungeons could be a little shorter, in my opinion. I'd rather be in dungeons more often than not. Whereas it's usually more just like running between towns and being on the roads and stuff like that, where you'll still bump into enemies, but it feels a little bit more like brainless. Enemies are displayed on the field, so there aren't random encounters or anything like that. So you are in control of how often you want to battle. This can hurt you by, you know, limiting how much, you know, resources you have, Sepith, all of that stuff, if you choose not to battle. So it's kind of up to you to get into battles as often as you want to, if you want to actually be able to buy all of the orbment and gear and all of that stuff. So yeah, I mean, my thoughts on the series so far is that, I mean, I guess it's not like the most fun JRPGs that I've ever played, but there's a lot of promise there, and the systems are really strong, and I'm really looking forward to how they continue to expand and evolve as the games go along. So it's really that promise of the continued evolution of all of this stuff in future entries that really keeps me going. And I mean, I am enjoying my time as I play. It just is a little bit slow. So sometimes, you know, sometimes it feels like I'm kind of playing because I know that the good stuff is coming later, and not necessarily the stuff I'm experiencing right now is so amazing, and that can be a little bit of a flaw. But I'm definitely excited to keep playing and excited to see, all the highs. I've heard that second chapter specifically gets really good in the second half, and I'm now entering the second half, so I'm very interested in seeing how things go. So yeah, I'd say that's what's the deal with Trails in the Sky. Let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments. Please drop a subscribe and a like if you enjoyed my commentary here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.